12. Old messages. The memory is full. Please erase your messages. Message 1.
Testing, testing, the 1, the 2, the 3. Can you hear this testing message perfectly? Or is there too much wind noise to hear it perfectly? Over and out.
Message 2.
This is testing message number 1 from the VTech telephone. This doesn't seem to have pretty much any side tone, which is kind of disappointing. I like to have a lot of side tone on the phone, but this doesn't really seem to have much of any. I am currently traversing across the room, and now I am all the way across the room near the water equipment, which of course is the wet. And so if it was still getting a good, clear signal there, then the range is as long as I would expect it to be. Okay, I'm returning back to the studio now, and I'm going to hang up the telephone using the end button, and then I'll call back again and I'll hang up into the base.
Message 3. Message 4.
Now we're going to do the speakerphone test. This is with the telephone on talk. I just switched it over to the speakerphone, and for comparative purposes, I'm speaking at about the same volume and distance as I was when it was on talk. Now I'm going to set it down onto the table, and the telephone has been set down onto the table. I'm speaking right above the phone, about 8 inches away from the telephone. Now I'm going to start moving back away from the telephone. Now I'm about 2 feet away from the telephone, 3 feet away from the telephone. This is about 4 feet away from the telephone. And this is about as far as I would expect it to really work good. Once you get past this range, I think that's a bit beyond what's a reasonable expectation. I'm going to keep going back. I'm at about 5 feet away from the telephone, 6, 7, 8. This is about the 8 feet mark, almost all the way across the room. 9, 10, and 11. This is about 11 feet away from the handset. This is all the way across the room. I have not heard the testing into machine set off yet, so it probably was still picking up just fine. I have to say, I'm generally very pleased with the quality of these newer, VTech telephones. A lot of the ones from the early 2000s, not early 2000s, early 2010s, even into the mid-2010s, there was some decent models. And the late 2000s, that era, a lot of the VTech phones seem to work pretty well, and the AT&T phones as well, because of course they come from the same manufacturer. Okay, that will conclude the testing messages. I'm going to hang up the telephone now.
Message 5.
Greetings. This is the testing message of the AT&T, or the Advanced American Telephones, which is not what AT&T stands for. Model 58405, 5.8 GHz digital Digitan spread spectrum telephone. I am going to exit the studio room now and start walking across the room. And I expect that as I get towards the other side of the room, it may start to get a little bit choppy, because I found the range on these phones is generally not that good. Now I'm all the way across the room. I do see the E on the screen for the enhancer mode, so that means it is having a difficult time getting a clear signal. So it probably was choppy over there. Okay, I'm returning back into the studio now, and I will hang up the telephone into the base unit. Okay, it didn't cut off that time because the handset did not make a good contact with the charging cradles. I'll try it again. Still didn't make contact. this is the handset on talk again. This is for comparative purposes. I'm going to switch the telephone over to the speakerphone now. Okay, I just switched over to the speakerphone, and I'm speaking at about the same volume and distance as I was before with it on talk. Now I'm going to set the phone down on the table. Okay, the telephone is set down onto the table, and I'm speaking right above the telephone. I'm going to start moving back now, and we'll see how good the pickup is on this telephone. So this is about 2 feet away from the telephone now, 3 feet away from the telephone, 4 feet away from the telephone. And this is kind of where I think it should still be working good, but I don't expect it to work much beyond this point because now we're just getting too far away for it to be realistic. 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet.
Message 7.
It did cut off, so I guess the pickup probably isn't all that great from a distance. Okay, this time I'm going to hang up using the buttons. I just turned it off speakerphone, so now it's on talk, and I'm going to hang up the call.
Message 8.
Okay, here we are on the base speakerphone. I'm hearing a bit of feedback on the base speakerphone. Not necessarily feedback, almost like a little bit of side tone coming through it, which is not necessarily supposed to happen. It is residing as I talk more, but it certainly is happening a little bit. I'm speaking about a foot above the telephone right over the table. It is on the carpet because I have found that putting it on the piece of wood does not really make it perform any better. It does change the sound quality, but it doesn't seem to really change the pickup all that much. So I'm going to start moving back from the telephone now. I'm about 2 feet away from the telephone, 3 feet away from the telephone. This is probably the approximate distance that you would talk on a base speakerphone set up at a computer table or something like that. Okay, now this is 4 feet away from the telephone, 5 feet away from the telephone, 6 feet away from the telephone, 7 feet away from the telephone, 8 feet away from the telephone, 9, 10, and now this is 11 feet away from the telephone, all the way across the room. And it hasn't cut off yet, so I guess it's still recording. So it must have been picking up clearly even at that distance.
Message 9. Message 10.
Good evening. Snap, click, deposit checks without closing that dating app. People's United Bank N.A., member FDIC. Today is Sunday, November 14th. People's United Bank, time 9:07. Current temperature.
Message 11.
I don't know if that could be heard on the message, but this appears to be picking up some kind of RF interference. I've never had that happen here before. I don't know what would be doing it. That's really quite strange. Anyways, the reason I was calling was to let you know that I have a lot of nostalgia to GE telephones. My grandparents always had a GE telephone in the kitchen, hanging on the wall. The first one goes back many years. I still have the thing somewhere, but it was one of the telephones that got damaged in one of numerous lightning strikes that happened over there. And so certain parts of that phone don't work completely properly anymore. But this telephone reminds me very much of that telephone because the buttons are the same kind of shiny gray plastic that the buttons on the other telephone were. And the lights above the line indicators look like they would illuminate the same way as the lights did on the other telephone. There was only one time that I can think of where they didn't have a GE telephone in the kitchen, and that was when they had some kind of a SBC or Bell Sonicor or something like that phone in the kitchen, and that phone was awful, and that thing never worked right. And then after that, there was another GE phone that was a trimline phone. I have that one somewhere as well, but the buttons stopped working properly, and I haven't been able to get it apart to fix it. And then after that, for a very brief period of time, they had I think I put it there, in fact. I put that clear trimline phone that I used to have in my bedroom many years ago into the kitchen, but it never really got into use because by then they had the cordless phones. They had the Uniden 1580, and before that they had a 2080 as well. And then they uglified the kitchen, and when they did that, they canceled out the phone outlet on the wall, so now there's no more corded phone in the kitchen. In fact, they also, at one point in time, had a cordless General Electric phone. It was a 2.4 gigahertz phone, and that one was pretty short-lived because the cordless phone had some problems from day one. It never worked quite right. You know, all those GE phones that they had never really worked the greatest. I don't know why they kept buying General Electric phones. I guess maybe it's for the same reason that they keep buying Duracell batteries.
Message 12.
This is the testing message on the Uniden EXP4241 2.4 gigahertz Anatien telephone. Now I'm already hearing a bit of static. There is a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi transmitter above this testing bench, so we are almost guaranteed to get a plethora of interference. I am departing the studio now, and I will walk across the room. I believe this is a 2.4 over 900 megahertz model, so you'll probably hear a lot of static on the 900 megahertz end, as the antennas didn't seem to be designed quite right on these as far as that's concerned. And then I'm hearing a ton of very rapid kind of clicking sounds on the 2.4 gigahertz side, which I'll change the channel, but I don't think any amount of channel changing is going to fix it. No, I'm still hearing on this channel as well. It's too bad that these didn't have a good range, because that's really the only flaw that I'm aware of in these 2.4 gigahertz economy models. Despite being a cheaper product, they were very reliable. They lasted a long time. The sound quality was really great if you were within range of the telephone. But if you were not within a close proximity of the base, the reception just wasn't good, and that was a very common complaint with these things. And I think that was somewhat tragic, because a lot of people buy economy products, and at the time you had the Uniden economy models, which really kind of stunk, and then you had other economy models from brands like AT&T and VTech, which their economy models were usually acceptable, and they still tend to be to this day. So I think that's one of the problems that Uniden had over the years, and it gave them a bad reputation, because not everybody wanted to dish out the hundreds of dollars that the higher-end True Series cost. It really wasn't until the DEC 6 era when Uniden finally got their economy models correct with the DEC 6 1580 telephone, which was an excellent telephone, one of my most used models. Really great set. Anyway, so that will conclude the staticky testing message on this Uniden 2.4 gigahertz telephone.
End of messages.